In this class, I'm going to be teaching you guys all about the smart watches niche. I specifically want to talk to you about a lot of the key information for this industry that you need to know that will really help you as far as bringing traffic into your website that's going to be interested in purchasing these smart watches. Now, just as a little bit of an overview, I want to talk about the smartwatch industry in general. While there have been smartwatches that were released back in the early 2000s, they were not like today's smartwatches in terms of having full capacity of a normal smartphone, basically. They had early ones that were calendars or organizers or reminders, PDAs, for example. However, the modern smartwatch, something that has the full capabilities of a smartphone, really didn't come along until the year 2013. And in fact, a lot of the big name cell phone manufacturers didn't even release theirs until 2014, and some of them not even until 2015. So with that said, this industry is really covering what I consider to be a new technology. And as a result, competition for it is going to be a lot lower compared with niches that have been around for a really long time. Something also important to remember about new technology is that there's likely going to be innovations and advancements that happen in the coming years. And this easily leads to new keywords that you can target. Just as a wild example, with an existing industry that you should already at least know something about, televisions. Pretty much everyone in America these days owns a television. And we used to have the old tube-style TVs that were heavy and bulky and ultimately didn't have really good display resolutions on them. But then as technologies advanced, you had new keyword phrases coming into the market, such as HD TV, 1080p, 1080i, 720p. All of these new terms revolving around that industry then become keyword phrases that people can search for. So what I would really recommend for you as far as future preparation for this industry, if you build a site about smartwatches, simply monitor industry news for upcoming advances. And then when you find out about them, especially if it is a new innovation, a new type of this smartphone or smartwatch technology, you can create information articles on your website to actually target these topics. Preferably, you do want to do this before those advances actually hit the public market. That way, you're ranking up in the top of search engines for those keyword phrases before the vast majority of other marketers begin targeting those same subjects. Now, I want to talk to you briefly about keyword targeting. And as I proceed through the rest of this class, a large part of what I'm going to be discussing with you will have to do with the items you see listed on my screen right now. There are a large number of different kinds of features that you can find with these smartwatches. And from one model to the next, some of them will have advantages or disadvantages in certain features and vice versa for other ones. So this should be important to you as an affiliate because consumers will often end up buying these products based on the actual features that are truly important to them. Not everybody wants a smartwatch for the same reason. One person might want it to be able to listen to music on it. One person might want it to be able to make cell phone calls on it without having an actual cell phone on them. Other people want something that's small and lightweight, while you might have some people that would prefer the larger screen simply to have a bigger viewing display. When you create content on your website to target these different features, you're doing this using these keyword phrases that relate to these smartwatch products. But what's really important is that when you target the features appropriately, if somebody is interested in a smartwatch that can do one specific thing, you can easily narrow down the products that you promote to them relating to that one topic. As an example, if somebody wanted a smartwatch that they could make calls on and would not actually need to have a smartphone to go with it, then your selection of these products becomes much, much smaller. There's really only a couple of them currently that have full cell phone capabilities without having to be paired up with an actual smartphone. Now, some of these features that I consider to be the most important, and a lot of consumers would also be considering to be most important, are going to be things like dependency on having a smartphone, the size and the weight of the smartwatch, the materials that are used in its construction, the type of bands that are available for it, the operating system that it runs on, the size and the resolution of the display screen, and then even beyond some of these main ones, there's really a whole bunch of other miscellaneous features that still apply in this same manner. These are easily things that you can create articles about on your website and target traffic that comes in through those articles to buy very specific products that match these important features. The first thing I want to talk about is smartphone dependency. There are a lot of smartwatches on the market right now. A lot of them are designed for a specific purpose. However, something that a lot of people may not initially realize is that you actually end up needing a smartphone to pair with most smartwatches. And a lot of times you need something that's coming from the same manufacturer. A really great example of this is the Apple Watch. To truly make it fully functional, you have to have it paired with an iPhone. So for somebody that does not own an iPhone, they might be a lot less interested in buying an Apple Watch. So you can target the watches that you're selling based on smartphones that people are already currently using, and let them know, hey, this smartwatch is compatible with these different smartphones. That way, when you have somebody searching for a smartwatch that will be compatible with their particular model of smartphone, you can easily end up in the search rankings for those kind of keywords. Now, with the Apple Watch, if you do not have an iPhone to pair with it, it still works. You can use it without that iPhone, but you simply will not have a lot of the features available to you without that pairing. As an example, you can make a phone call on an Apple Watch. However, you do have to have it paired with an iPhone to be able to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to have that capability. Now, there are also a limited number of standalone smartwatches that operate just like a cell phone would, and they do not require to have a smartphone device paired with it. One of these would be the Samsung Gear S. So for people that do not have a smartphone and maybe they just want to do a smartwatch instead, or maybe they want to replace their smartphone with a smartwatch, there is a very limited selection of products that you would want to be promoting to that type of person. You also have a lot of Android-based watches. These seem to have a little more flexibility to them than the Apple Watch, for example. Apple is very exclusive with its own brand, but a lot of the Android-based watches can actually be paired with Android smartphones, at least those that are running a version of the Android operating system that is compatible. Another aspect that's really important to many people is the size and the weight of these devices. Since you're going to be having this watch on your wrist quite likely all day long, the comfort of the person that is wearing it is going to be extremely important. Some people have large arms and a large wrist as a result, and having a smartwatch with a really big screen, something that maybe even weighs a little bit more, would not really be that bothering to somebody like that. However, kind of as a contrast, a fairly small woman would likely not be comfortable wearing the largest models of smartwatches that they have available. They're probably going to prefer something smaller, more dainty, something more like the Apple Watch. They're actually considerably smaller than the Samsung Gear watches. Now, generally, when you have a bigger watch that also weighs more, chances are you're going to have a larger display screen, possibly some more powerful internal components that go along with that. So to a certain extent, the size and the weight may also be relational to other aspects such as that. A more powerful phone or a more powerful smartwatch, a more larger display screen with a better resolution, perhaps. Weight is kind of more of a secondary aspect, I would say, to this whole thing. I think people are more concerned with the size that it's going to be while sitting on their wrist. However, they also don't want something that's too incredibly heavy, especially not for their body frame. Really early smartwatch launches actually failed because they were simply too heavy. They were 2 times or more the current weight of existing smartwatches. And it was a major complaint and drawback to those original models. And as a result, they ended up getting discontinued, and people really were not that interested in them. Even though they really liked the technology, it just simply was not something that worked into their normal lives very well. One other thing with smartwatches that is at least a little bit unique to this type of product compared with a smartphone. Smartphones are kind of getting into this kind of thing nowadays where certain models of smartphones might offer different design choices or different construction materials that can be used. The new LG G4, for example, that's coming out has the leather backing on the back of it. Well, with smartwatches, you have the same kind of thing, except it is much more prevalent. Ultimately, what the watch is made out of can really affect the quality, the durability, and oftentimes the overall appearance of these watches. So most models of smartwatches have a variety of choices to go along with it. And the construction material is one of these main choices, and it can actually drastically affect the price of the watch. Now, there's a bunch of different materials that are used in these constructions. Some of the most common ones that you're going to see will be things like plastic, steel, stainless steel, aluminum, and even 18-karat gold-plated. Right here in this picture, you can actually see this is a Apple Watch, and it is plated with 18 karat gold all the way around the outside. This watch retails for around $1,000 or something like that. And a lot of that cost is just in that little strip of 18 karat gold that you're putting on it. Oftentimes, a consumer might be looking for not only a watch that has the various features that they want, but a watch that's going to have the style or the design that fits best with what their own personal style is. So it can actually be pretty important to have some information relating to this to let people know what kind of choices they have available if they're looking for one very specific construction material. If somebody wants an 18 karat gold plated smartwatch, what choices do they have? Obviously the Apple Watch, do they have additional choices beyond that? Information like this will be commonly sought after. Now, having to do with construction material yet again, but going to a different part of a smartwatch, actually has to do with the bands that are on these watches. From one product to the next, you can have a lot of variety with the bands that are included, but once again, a lot of models will still have the choice of what kind of band the person wants to have on their smartwatch. Some of these watches will even have swappable bands. What I mean by a swappable band is on pretty much any of these smartwatches, you can change out the band. You can remove the band and replace them with another band. However, the term swappable band is really more referring to a universal watch strap. There's a standard 22 millimeter watch strap that you can buy for just normal watches. And as long as the smartphone or the smartwatch is compatible with one of these swappable bands, you can actually buy any band of your choosing. There are certain products, though, that do not use these swappable bands. You can still change them out, but you often have to buy a band designed for that specific watch. Obviously, the models that have the swappable bands are going to be more appealing to people because they're not going to be limited to that smaller selection. They can ultimately choose from any type of material, any type of color that they really want to have as the band of their smartwatch. Also, the bands can end up affecting the final cost of the product. If you're buying a watch with a plastic band, you're going to get the cheapest price, obviously, or a rubber band even. If you're getting something with a stainless steel band, maybe something a little more common like this silver one right here, something more like what you might see on a normal watch being sold in a nice department store or something. Something like this can easily add $50 or even $100 to the cost of the watch. You could also promote these swappable bands directly as an accessory for these products. For people that already own a smartwatch and maybe they just want to get a different band. Maybe they went with the standard cheap band that came with it, and after a while when they kind of like the watch, but maybe the band's a little uncomfortable, or maybe they would just prefer a different look or a different color or something to it. All these would be great opportunities to try to get them to buy additional bands, especially if you can promote one band and it would work for almost any smartphone that is out there. Now, the operating system is also something that I consider to be really important. Since smartphones are so common these days, a lot of times people that are using smartphones already will have a predefined preference when it comes to the operating system that they like to use. You obviously have some people that are very devoted to the Apple brand and have an iPad, an iPhone, and therefore would likely end up wanting to get an Apple Watch. But then you have other people that absolutely hate Apple because of the restrictiveness and the brand favoritism that goes on in that company. And a lot of these people end up preferring Android instead. So certain watches are made with a very specific operating system. So if somebody is more focused on simply getting an Android smartwatch, you would again have a limited selection of products that you would promote to that particular person. The operating system can also end up affecting the overall features that are part of it, the compatibility with other devices such as other smartphones, how I mentioned an Apple Watch and an iPhone pairing together, and even the availability of apps. So people that want to do a particular thing may need to get a phone with a very specific operating system, or those features may simply not be available to them. Now, in general, Android Wear and Watch OS are the two most popular. But there are plenty of other operating systems. I've listed a couple more of these for you here. And even beyond these, there's still more. There's not as much of a clear division in operating systems with smartwatches as there is with smartphones. For example, Android is the dominating smartphone operating system, whereas Android Wear actually only accounts for about 15% of all smartwatches. There are even some smartwatch manufacturers that are making multiple models, and some of them use Android Wear and others use a completely different operating system. So there's definitely a little bit of a fragmentation, I guess you could say, with the operating systems for the smartwatches, compared at least with the smartphone industry. Now, earlier I had talked about the size of a smartwatch. Ultimately, the overall size of a smartwatch is likely going to limit the display size of the smartwatch. The bigger it is, the larger display you can have on it, obviously. However, even though something might have a much larger display screen than another model, it does not necessarily mean that the quality of that display is better. You have resolutions. These would be two numbers separated by an X, something that you're probably used to seeing with a television, or smartphones do this as well. Computer monitors, they all have resolutions in pixels. A number of pixels tall by a number of pixels wide. This gives you the screen resolution of the actual display. However, the quality of that screen resolution is ultimately going to be determined by the pixel density, what is called PPI, pixels per inch. The higher the PPI number, the better the display quality is going to be. As an example, the Samsung Gear S basically has about twice the display size of the Apple Watch models. I believe the larger one is maybe around 60% of the size of the Samsung Gear S, and the smaller one is below 50%. Despite this difference in the size of the screen, the resolution, the quality of that display is actually better on the Apple devices. They have a 326 ppi, whereas I believe the Samsung Gear S has a 300 ppi. So for people that want a certain screen size, or maybe they're looking for a smartwatch with the best possible resolution and screen quality to it, there is a very clear distinction and a choice when it comes to things like that. Apple actually ranks as having one of the highest PPIs out of all of the smartwatches. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of other things about smartwatches besides these most important aspects that I've already been discussing with you today. And each device obviously has different features and specifications from other devices. So even though these may not be the most important aspects compared with some of the other ones that I've already discussed, it certainly doesn't mean that they would not be worth targeting. You can easily create topics on your website to cover these different aspects of smartwatches to help people decide which one they would rather buy based on different features such as this. You have things like the battery life, the type of display. I'm not talking about resolution. I'm talking about the actual kind of screen that is used. You have some watches that are always on and some that will turn off from inactivity, kind of like a smartphone will. You have different kinds of user interfaces in terms of how you navigate the features of the phone, how you use the phone. You have some that have speakers included on them, which actually is not very many of them. The Apple Watch and the Samsung Gear, those do have speakers, but there are quite a few smartwatch brands that actually don't have a speaker in them at all. So you wouldn't be able to do things like listen to music or really even make a phone call on them because you wouldn't be able to hear the person. That also brings me to phone calls. Some smartwatches are capable of doing a phone call just through the watch. Some of them you will need a paired phone to go with it, others you won't, but still some smartwatches simply cannot do phone calls. You have other things like Wi-Fi, fitness trackers, water resistant, the price, and honestly, there's plenty of other things that go along with smartwatches that I still haven't even listed or discussed. Memory, processors. There's all kinds of more technical specifications that certain users might be a little more interested in than others. Any of these things and any of the things I've already discussed with you today are great informational topics that you can use to create standalone articles on your website to help draw in search engine traffic and then direct those people along to the relevant product to purchase. You can also use this kind of information on your product review pages. Let's say you have a page on your website that is promoting the Apple Watch and you want to give a very thorough review about it. Try to talk about all of these different aspects that I have covered today, all on one page for that product review. Then when people are searching for not only that type of watch, but for information relating to one of these topics having to do with that smartwatch, they'd be much, much more likely to find your website as a result. And then you simply provide them with the helpful information that they are looking to find and refer them along to complete the sale on the smartwatch that they want. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about today has to do, again, with all the other stuff I've been discussing today, in that sometimes people will buy electronic products for a very specific use. And this is something that you can use for targeting search engine keywords here once again. It could have to do with the features that I've already talked about today, but it can even have to do with software that is available on a particular model of a smartwatch. A lot of new technologies actually gain their popularity because people want to buy them for a single specific purpose and not necessarily for all the different features that it has to offer. I'm a big believer that history has proven this to be true in other electronics niches and should therefore likely remain true for the smartwatch industry as well. Look for extremely appealing apps that are designed for a very specific situation, especially apps that may be exclusive to just a smartphone. And then you might have yourself a situation where somebody really wanted to be able to use that app, and the only way they can possibly do it is by buying this specific smartwatch. When you get yourself into a position like that, you're much, much more inclined to be able to refer a sale because they have a very clearly oriented goal preset in their mind that they're looking to accomplish. Now, to give you an example based on electronics from history. Back in 1997, a video game was released called GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64 system, which was pretty new at the time. It had not been a major seller because there were plenty of other gaming console systems that had already been released, and a lot of people already had tons of games and had been using those for a while. So the N64 comes around, and a lot of people actually went out and bought the Nintendo 64 system exclusively for one single reason, and that was to play GoldenEye 007. That game sold 8 million copies, and I'd be willing to bet that millions of Nintendo 64 systems were sold along with those 8 million copies. In fact, I can vouch for this because I was one of them. I bought the Nintendo 64 back in 1997 for no reason other than to play GoldenEye 007. I still have it sitting around, and in fact, that was the only game that I ever owned for that video game system. Now, relating this to a more modern smartwatch example, and this is just one wild example that I was able to find pretty quickly from just some basic searching out there on the internet, and you can easily find all kinds of other situations just like this. This smartwatch right here is the Samsung Gear S. I've mentioned it a couple of times already in this class. Well, there is an app for this smartwatch that is for the BMW i3, and you can actually monitor the state of your electric vehicle from your watch. You can tell how much of a charge you have left on it, how many miles you are still capable of driving on it. This kind of stuff, for somebody that has already put down an enormous amount of money to buy this new BMW i3 electric or hybrid vehicle, whichever it may be, Something like a smartwatch purchase to go along with that is really going to be a drop in the bucket compared to their other purchase. And so a lot of times they may not even think twice about dropping a couple $100s on one of these smartwatches just to use it for one very specific purpose. You can find this kind of stuff, again, by going out there on Google, searching for information having to do with what kind of software is available for specific smartwatches, or maybe for certain operating systems for those smartwatches. Ultimately, no matter what smartwatch you decide to promote, whether you promote one or whether you promote a selection of these smartwatches, I would highly encourage you to not just build a product review page on your site having to do with that product. You still do want to have that product review page that then promotes that product, but all these other things that I've been talking to you about today, build additional content pages on your site that then link back to the relevant product review page on your site. That way you can bring traffic in from the search engines to those informational articles. Teach people how it's going to be able to accomplish whatever they're searching for with a very specific product, and then funnel them along to your product review pages to make those purchases. So this is not only a prime way that you can refer sales on these smartwatches, but this would also be one of the best ways that you could go about getting traffic for them. Think about it. You probably could not build a product review page about the Apple Watch right now and have any kind of a hope in getting into the top 10 of Google with that Apple Watch page, having to do with the basic keyword phrase Apple Watch. However, if you have specific information about uses for that, situations where people would want to buy the Apple Watch, but your keyword is not actually the Apple Watch, it might be things like smartwatch with the best resolution, for example. Still the Apple Watch. However, you get to that through different keywords. So that's the whole idea here behind today's training, in teaching you what all those different aspects are that you can use to target these smartwatches, seeing as how your chances to get traffic on the actual name of the smartwatch with no other additional keywords being included would be pretty slim. But when you're including all these extra keywords, that's when you really get to tap into all the traffic that is out there available for it, but at much, much lower competitions, because you're not going to have tons of people building pages on the internet having to do with all these different topics that I talked about. However, you're going to have millions of pages just about the Apple Watch. So you simply need to approach these smartwatches from a different angle to attract that traffic and then refer them along to a sale.